Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another Friday morning episode of Maker That Money, the podcast where we talk about turning your hobby into your jobby. I am Pooch of Repkord, and with me this morning, I have Mr. Andrew, king of the Empire of Sticky 3D Gloop. Andrew, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, sir? Happy
I
birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. 45 laps around the sun is a really an admirable amount of distance, I think.
Yeah.
An endurance race, right? So maybe we should
Yeah.
throw that on my resume. Also this morning with us, Miss Emma Fletcher from Learn to Solder Kits and Evergreen Support, a multi-business owner. So
Oh.
like this is like a twofer, Andrew. We got a two for one deal
Wow.
today.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Emma, how are you today? Thank you for joining
I'm
us.
good. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh, I listen, guys, I've been hassling. Emma is actually local to me, one of my few entrepreneurial minded local cohorts of sort, and I was very lucky to connect with her, and I've been begging her to be on the pod for a while now. And so we finally made it happen. She admits she's not a
Yeah.
morning person, so she got up and had to
I'm
pound some
not a
coffee for
morning
this.
person, but I'm here and I'm excited.
You're here, and we are so
Nice.
lucky to have you. Why don't you give everybody a sense of who you are, what your companies are? Give us the elevator pitch, two elevator pitches. Ready?
Two elevator pitches. Okay,
Go.
sure. I'll start with Learn to Solder Kits. That's kind of my maker-oriented business. I also call it my OG business because it's the one I started 7 years ago.
Oh,
And we
wow.
make DIY electronics kits. They teach soldering, exactly like the name. Learn to solder. Each kit, we have 3 kits that we sell. Very simple, 30-minute projects designed for people who've never picked up a soldering iron before and want to get started.
And I'm not just saying this because Emma has sent me these things. They are awesome. They're cute. They're
Thank
just
you.
well designed, well packaged. The instructions are so good. I'm in because like our instructions are always something that just drives me crazy. But she did a really good job with that. So that's LTSK.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's LTSK. And so I started that 7 years ago, side hustle. Like I was working full time
Another
as a
side
software
hustler.
engineer, kind of a passion project, right? Side hustle. And I think I really got serious about it in 2019. That's when I was like, well, this, I've been doing this for a long time and it's got some traction. Like, can we make it like more legit,
Let's
right?
make
So
some money with
Oh,
this. Let's
make
cool.
turn our
money, right?
hobby
Yeah.
into our jobby.
So
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
And so I did that. And one of the challenges I ran into running Learn to Solder Kits was I didn't have anybody to do customer support. And that was particularly hard working full time. I was 9 to 5, support requests would come in, nobody would email back, and it was a thing. So I
Mm.
wanted kind of a part time,
Mm-hmm.
super part time support person to check in on the inbox and couldn't find anybody to do it. And eventually, I decided to start my second company called Evergreen Support, which is designed to do exactly that for solo founders or really small teams. They've got some level of support needs, but it's not quite enough to really bring someone on full time. I work with a partner,
Mm.
Ellis, and we basically babysit your inbox, right? We do responses if we know the question, the answer to the question. We escalate it if we don't know the answer and it needs your attention, immediately, but hopefully gives you some peace of mind so you can
Mm-hmm.
focus on building your business.
So you're like the
That's
first
awesome.
line of defense for companies on support land. That's
Yep. First line, we filter a lot of things. We like gather information, that ticket that comes in, it's broken, right? And then they don't give you any additional context. We're the people who
Yes.
respond like, so sorry, can you please give us a little bit more information about the situation so we
Oh,
can look into it, right?
so we're gonna pin that for a second because I do
yes.
want to pick your brain on some support stuff that I had
Sure.
some decent chat going on Twitter on earlier this week. But today's topic is actually about setting reasonable goals so that you can achieve sustainable growth. Now, the term serial entrepreneur obviously is thrown around loosely for a lot of people, but you are literally like a serial entrepreneur. And I love that your businesses are born of your own necessity. We've all done that. We feel that, right? Well, I can't
Yeah.
find anybody that can meet my needs, so I'm gonna just do it myself, right?
Yep.
And just think of the amazing, companies that have come about as a result of that exact notion. And what's funny is oftentimes what you ended up starting to do is not what you ultimately may end up doing years later, when you kind of are stringing together all these different little verticals and segments for you that you have no idea what's going to hit and what's not. And maybe you're going to continue to manage all of them. Maybe Evergreen will take off. Maybe Learn to Solder will take off more. Who knows? Maybe you're going to start another company that you haven't even thought of yet. But
I've got a lot of ideas too. I think maybe that maker mindset, right, is like
Oh, yes.
constantly have new ideas coming in, and I'm like, oh, that'd be a really good business for someone to run.
It's
Should
a
I do that? I'm like,
blessing.
wait, I don't have any time.
It's a blessing and a curse, right? I mean, we've had lunch together a couple times, and like before we know it, it's like 3 hours gone by. I'm like, oh, what if we did this? Oh, what if we did that? Oh, it's like it's so easy to just spiral into like, oh, that's a really good idea. And now you're just trying to decide. It's unfortunate because I wish that you didn't have to like pick and choose. If there was a better way to, have all these irons in the fire, and it could be sustainable, and maybe it can be. Maybe that's what we need to discuss a little bit more today, because as makers, as entrepreneurs, we always, I guess I can't speak for everybody, but it's like probably tend to bite off more than we can chew. Yeah. Is that fair?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the focus is constantly under threat, right? Like if you want, to grow, a lot of times like the common wisdom seems to be like that laser focus and do one thing and do it well. And you hear a lot of different mantras around that, but then the conservative nature of us is like, we want to diversify. We want to make sure we don't have all our eggs in but one basket. And so how do you reconcile those two notions? So we'll get into a little bit of that.
Topic.
Yeah. Okay. Before we do that, though, a little housekeeping. First, call to actions. Mike, our resident CTA expert, like and smash and do all the subscribe, bring a friend, all that stuff. If you're listening back after the fact, we do record just about every Friday, 9 a.m. on the YouTubes. Great ways to interact with us on the chat. If you want to feed us questions, comments, we love it. Love it. Andrew really loves it. Tell him you love it, Andrew.
I love it.
And then you can find us on all the major podcasting platforms as well after the fact. If you're an audio only person, you want to listen to this while you're doing something else because you're a busy person like we are. This is a podcast first and foremost too. So there's all that. Also, what we have to take care of is our wins for the week. We always like to be positive. We like to focus on the good energy, block out the bad, harness the good energy, block the bad. So, wins for the week. Emma, I'm going to put you on the spot first. We're going to focus. You need to think of something good that has happened to you this week. Could be your personal life, could be your business life. What is it?
There's been a lot of wins this week, but I think I'm going to pick one that I'm particularly proud of. We had a purchase order come in from a community college for Learn to Solder kits, which isn't particularly unique. We get a couple, a month, I would say. But I feel like I handled it really smoothly with me and my team. I have 2 employees who help me with Learn to Solder kits, and I've been trying to make it less of a one-off kind of situation where we don't have a plan and more of a situation where, okay, they want 300 kits, no problem, right? Here's the paperwork we need to send. Here's how we ship it. And it went really smoothly, and we were able to get it out in about 24 hours.
Wow, that's fantastic. I know when we were first chatting, you would kind of sweat that big order, right? Because you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver and all that stuff. So your capacity now has grown substantially, I feel like, since we first even chatted. That's great.
Yeah, definitely.
24 hours for 300 units. That's great. So I'm assuming that means you've had a little bit of a stock reserve you've been able to build up?
Yeah, we've been working on making sure we have the right stock ready to go both here, and then we also sell on Amazon. So it makes it a little challenging because the stock kind of gets split, right?
Sure.
So making sure we have our kind of local, in business stock and the Amazon stock that we need to fulfill any orders.
Right. Awesome. Well, congrats on that win. Andrew, you're up. Give us a win.
Boy.
Pick your favorite. I know there's a ton.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's just say I'll go with the general one. February for Gloop has been record setting in every way. Last, couple weeks ago, I shared that
It's
we
my
broke
applause
our
button.
highest revenue, in a single day
Yeah.
record. This month we've blown past our revenue goals for the month. Every month we have, general revenue goals. This has been our highest grossing revenue in the entire company. In fact, we've done more revenue this month than we've done in like 5 or 6 months prior.
That is
That's
So
awesome.
hockey stick
Congratulations.
growth.
that's
Yes.
great. Now you just got to keep your foot on the gas, right?
Yep.
That's really,
Yep.
really awesome to hear, Andrew. I'm glad to hear that. And I've always said it. You've got such a great, unique product. You're well known and respected in the community. You really are a great case study in how to build and honestly, I feel like do in a sustainable way. You bootstrapped. Emma, you're
Hmm.
you're bootstrapped as well, right? You're not venture funded
Yeah,
or any
I am bootstrapped. I
yeah.
actually used to
Nice.
work for VC startups like Silicon Valley startups as a software
Oh,
engineer.
So
So I
you've
wow.
have some
seen the dark
stories
side.
about that experience,
Yeah.
but my businesses are bootstrapped.
Well, good. Okay, so that'll dovetail in nicely with the theme, I think, today. So what we want to talk about is setting reasonable goals for sustainable growth. So that's kind of like a lot of buzzwords, maybe not buzzwords, but whatever. My first question to you, Emma, is what do you think about what does that mean to you? What is what is a reasonable goal and what is sustainable growth? How do you define those things first and foremost?
Oh, that's hard. That's a big question.
You're allowed to pass to
Uh,
Andrew if you would like. You get one pass. One pass. Okay.
I mean, for me, one of the really important things about starting my businesses and now running my businesses full time is that I would say, happier and healthier than I was kind of on the corporate wheel, right? Because I was getting pretty burnt out doing what I was doing
Mm,
before. And so thinking about sustainability and not just revenue goals is hugely important. I mean, obviously, you need money.
Mm-hmm.
Money, you got to pay your bills, and there's stress that comes with not having enough money.
Yeah.
But also recognizing like we're getting there, we're growing steadily each month. That's a win. That's okay, right? Let's
mhm,
celebrate that and we'll get there eventually.
Sure. Sure.
mhm.
Andrew, what does reasonable goals for sustainable growth mean to you?
I think it's really about level setting. As a maker and an entrepreneur, we tend to get really excited about the ideas that we're working on, and we can see all of this infinite potential.
Mm-hmm.
But as a part of that, like, an idea, we've talked about this in the past, is worth nothing until you can actually start executing on it. And I think also, we as these maker and entrepreneurs, we gloss over so many of the small details to actually execute on said idea. It's
Yeah.
always, oh, this will be easy, this will be quick, like,
Oh,
one, two, three,
famous
and
last
here we
words.
go. I'm
Yep.
off to the races. So I think it's really just about trying to take a step back and level set and understand that it's always going to take longer than you think, and that's okay. Don't get caught up in this race idea or mentality where you're comparing yourself to other startups or other, companies that have been established, because again, you only see what's, on the outside. You become an
Mm-hmm.
overnight
Mm-hmm.
success in 5 years, right?
Yep.
You got to go through all of those trials and keep working at it, I think. And so it's just
Mhm.
about figuring out okay goals to have, and
Mm-hmm.
understand that you're going to miss some of those goals, and that's not the end of the world.
That's a
So,
that's a really great point. We hear that phrase, comparison is the thief of joy,
mhm,
oftentimes, right? That
Mhm.
especially in this day and age, in the social media rich environment we're in, everybody wants to just project success and happiness and rainbows and butterflies and all that good kumbaya
mhm,
stuff. And it's really a disservice in a large way because it leads us to comparing ourselves to others more, whether we want to or not. I think that just kind of
mhm,
happens. And it's something I still struggle with. It's something that I struggle with, especially on birthdays, because you're just confronted with the fact that another year has gone by, and you're like, okay, where should I be in my life as a 45-year-old at this point? And for some reason, I have
Sure.
weird just expectations of like, okay, at this age, I should have this much money in the bank, and I should have this level of success, and da 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 da. And but what is that based on? That goal. Well, one, I never articulated a specific goal for that, so that's part of the problem. And two, it varies so wildly depending on your personality, your socioeconomic status, where you live, all kinds of things. And so defining the goals, defining what success is, looks totally different for different people. And it does you no good to compare yourself to somebody that just didn't have the same upbringing or start as you did. I don't know if you guys do. You guys follow Veritasium on YouTube? Are you familiar with who Derek
yes.
is?
So
Derek is an awesome individual.
He just dropped a fantastic video that just like was one of my favorites to watch, and it was it was about some of what we're talking about here, the comparison, not comparing yourselves to others, sustainable, like some survivorship bias, but mostly like the luck component. And we talk about luck in business all the time, like, oh, luck is the intersection of opportunity. I'm just gonna drop all the sayings on everybody, right? Like,
yes,
it's where opportunity meets preparation or whatever. But he says in this video, and I'll try to remember to throw a link back, or producer, if you would be so kind as to look up Veritasium's latest video and drop a link for us, that'd be fantastic. The argument that he makes is that we really, really discount how much luck actually plays a factor. If you distill down to like even just when you're born, where you're born, all of those things. And that just puts you on a completely different playing field. Like, we say we're bootstrapped, but let's be honest. We are lucky enough that we had money that we had worked. We had good paying jobs. We might have inherited some money. We may have had friends that lent us some money or something. We did not start from zero. When we talk about bootstrapping, it's not like we were born destitute. This is not a Alexander Hamilton story, sadly. So we're lucky in the sense that we had a pretty good start to begin with, and then obviously recognizing that you come from a place of privilege is big. We're not dealing with any of the bias that people of color might have or other stuff. Now, we don't need to go too heavy into this, Emma, but like, obviously as a female in the space, your experience is different. I don't know if you've gone into that. It's a bit of a digression. If you feel comfortable talking about what that feels like, I think it's interesting stuff. But
yeah, I think particularly working as a software engineer. I mean, I worked for a software engineer for almost 10 years, both in big corporations. I started my career at Intel, which is what brought me to Sacramento, California. And then I moved to smaller kind of Bay Area based startup companies. And it was not uncommon for me to be the only woman on the team. I mean, I think the majority of my career, I was the only female developer on a team. I mean, I was very lucky to have fantastic coworkers, a lot of support. But that's also something I looked for when I interviewed for jobs. I would kind of ask them some questions about their diversity and inclusion and what they were doing to work on that, to make sure that I selected the right place. Because unfortunately, kind of, we've all heard bad stories and the kind of programmer culture that can be out there, and it definitely exists.
I of course, yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody would dispute that it exists, but it's certainly got to be hard, especially as a female in a tech centric space. So, anyway, like I said, a bit of a digression, but my point that I want to try to make is that when you're setting your goals and when you're talking about what's sustainable, that's going to be, like I said, very different depending on where you're starting. And so let's continue down that adventure for a second, and let's focus in on just like the goal setting component. Let's take it one bit at a time. All right. So
Oh boy.
think about, for both of you guys, when each of you are setting goals for your own business.
Mm-hmm.
One, do you feel like they're reasonable? Like, what are you the kind of person that is just moonshot goals typically, and you're just always struggling to reach that? Or do you feel like you've gotten better at, taking those incremental step goals and being realistic?
Good question. So I think I set pretty conservative goals. I mean, I've been, and I think maybe I've gotten better at hitting them or better at setting them more conservatively because I keep beating them, right? Like I usually pick like a number and a date, right? Like I want to hit this revenue or I want to hit whatever by this date. So like one of my goals that I had was to get to 5,000 in monthly revenue for our business Evergreen by September of 2023. And we're 97% of the way there today, right?
Nice. That's awesome.
Which is awesome. I mean, it's great.
So you're
It
already
feels
crushing
amazing.
Okay, so
Right.
you're almost like
Mhm.
too conservative with your goal
Maybe
setting.
too, because now I'm like, maybe I should have picked
Mhm.
a bigger number or a closer date. I mean, it feels great to have that win. But I think going back to what you were saying about goalposts, one of the challenges that I've had is my goalpost is always moving, right? Particularly when I was doing Learn to Solder kits, I remember I was stuck at about 80K in revenue for the year. This was a while ago. And I was like, man, I really want to hit 100K in revenue. Like, wow, that's just going to be amazing if I do. That's so hard. And I've been trying for so long. And I hit it. And like the next day, I was like, okay, I got to get to 250,000. Like, let's do this. Right. Instead of like taking the moment to pause. And I had a friend I was kind of talking with. They're like, you just hit 100K. That's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
go celebrate. Like, what are you doing thinking about, you can think about that next week. You got to pause for a moment.
So revenue is always one of those ones as an entrepreneur that we like. That's just like that goal. And it's funny because we kind of pick these,
They're kind of arbitrary,
the arbitrary
right?
numbers, right? Like we're like, oh, just that even number, like 100,000. I mean, but I think that that's good. And I think, especially when you're getting started, I would argue what you did, Emma, is better to start more conservative so you can achieve that goal rather than setting yourself up for being disappointed. Like tack up the W's, guys. That's why we talk about the wins. So, you're going to start to learn, like, it's all about gathering the data. Emma and I talk about gathering data all the time. And so when you're first getting started, you really don't know what you're capable of, what's reasonable, all this stuff, how quickly something's going to take off. And so once you start to get more data, once you get a couple years, you see it through a few seasons of sales, you have a much better idea. Now you can start to like kind of zero in on what a more reasonable goal is. So Emma, where you are now and knowing what you've hit, you've adjusted your goal. So what's your next target for your MRR? First of all, will you define MRR? Because it gets thrown out in Twitter land all the time. You'll see it with the little bars for the making public
so
people.
MRR stands for monthly recurring revenue, and it's very popular, particularly in the software space. We don't see it as much in the physical product maker space because that's usually like you want a thing and you pay money for the thing, and it's like a one-time transaction.
Right.
But monthly recurring revenue is like any subscription-based business. Think of your Netflix, right? They have a monthly recurring revenue. So the way that Evergreen support is designed is it's a monthly payment for services that we provide every day for you and your business.
Yep.
The nice thing about MRR is it's kind of predictable. I mean, yes, there will be cancellations, it does happen, but you got to know, okay, I've got this much is what I'm going to make next month, and hopefully the month after that, and then hopefully it will grow as I get more subscriptions. So that's how Evergreen is run, while Learn to Solder kits is the traditional, we have a kit, you pay us money, we send you the kit. Hopefully you come and buy more kits, right?
Yeah, so you're doing product-based and a service-based industry. So, and I'm sure there's, benefits and drawbacks to both. But thank you for that awesome definition. Also of note, there is a large component on Twitter of the software as a service community, I guess,
Hmm.
that talks, and they use a hashtag called Make in Public, which I love because it's basically like a transparency, a lot of like, I don't know if you've heard the term, I know you've heard the term, Emma, but like indie hackers and people out there that are
Hmm.
like kind of solopreneurs that are software based, releasing stuff, a lot of the, you know, AI tools that we see out there now, or there's a ton of different examples of SaaS businesses out there. But if you're interested in this, search for hashtag Make in Public, and you can see some of these solopreneurs, indie hackers, and service-based companies kind of sharing their experience as they go, which is so awesome because it's not a traditional thing. We don't usually see people talking about the money as much. That's kind of a
Hmm.
taboo
Hmm.
historically, but it's so helpful as somebody that's getting started to like get a sense of where other people are and what you might be able to expect for similar, you know,
Hmm.
business models. And so it gives you
Yeah.
some data to go on, and it's a great community, a lot of supportive individuals. We've got a little bit of crossover in here. I know I saw Mark was with us earlier. I don't know if he's still here, but shout out to, was it Judo Hacker? What's his handle?
Oh yeah, he's great. He's
Yeah.
one of
So
my earliest friends in the indie hacker community. So that's
yeah,
awesome.
That's
so I
awesome.
know he's big into that stuff, and he's got some great stuff as
Yeah,
well. Well,
I agree with everything you said. I love that community. It's I think there's a lot of similarities kind of between the maker community and the kind of indie hacker software bootstrapped community of just being really welcoming to people. Like it's okay if you're just getting started.
yeah,
You
Hmm.
know, people will encourage you, give you advice, and be like, "Don't worry if you're gonna fail." You know, it happens to all of us, and
yeah.
that's a really nice environment to be in when you're
Well,
starting out.
that's one of my goals for this show. I really want to have somebody on here that will tell a good failure story at some point. I know not a lot of people are. Yeah, there you are. Hey, Mark, shout out. We're good to see you in the chat, man. Um, Derek was talking about in his video too. Like we hear about all the wins. We have a survivorship. Like people that are
Yep.
successful almost have this mentality that it was the hardworking, you know, stuff that got them there because they're the survivors, you know. But we don't hear about all
Hmm.
the people that just didn't make it along the way. And there's so much good learning and teaching that comes from
Mhm.
that. And Andrew, we've talked in the past about, you know, where
Hmm.
success 5 years in the overnight success is 5 years in the making. A lot of
Yeah.
Hmm.
those stories, very common threads, are like these aren't our first rodeos. We've had failed businesses
Mhm.
before, but like a lot of
Yep.
people don't really share that experience as much.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I think
Hmm.
Andrew, you've closed a business before. I think you shared that on the
he
podcast.
has.
Yep.
I've closed 3 or 4 businesses, right? So I have
Hmm.
plenty of failures. I started my first business in 2008, right? That was my first
Wow.
try. And
Yeah.
I've
Tell us
gone
about that. Tell us
through a
about that. Let's
few
go.
iterations.
Let's stay on that for a
Okay.
second,
So
if you don't mind.
so yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it. I think every single one has informed me on where I am now in my businesses,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
My first business was called Bytes and Bits Computer Solutions, and that was
Mm.
my business. And I did at home kind of IT work. I mean, this is like 2008, 2009.
Oh
I was like
wow.
the classic kid who was like good with computers, you
Uh
know, like, oh,
huh.
can you fix my printer? You know, that kind of stuff. And I ended up finding a market in people who were a little bit older, kind of an elderly market, had not used computers very much. Their kids were, you know, started to email picture attachments of their grandkids, and they're like, I'm not sure how to open this picture attachment. Can we print it? Like, how do we do that? Or, you know, Skype was just kind of starting. Like, how do I Skype with my grandkids?
Yeah.
Great clients. I mean, they gave me all the cookies. I was charging $25 an hour, which I was like, oh my God. I had been making $7 an hour at the
Yeah.
movie theater
Yeah.
before,
Yep.
right?
At the time, it was like big money for you. That's awesome.
Oh my God, $25 an
Yeah.
hour. I just thought I was set for like the rest of my life. You know, that was
I'm gonna
big
help
payday,
octogenarians
right?
get online for the rest of my life.
Uh,
Uh,
and that was great. And I think I learned a lot about a service-based business, right? Because it was like a lot of client interaction, learning
Hmm.
about their problems and their goals, and like
sure.
how can I help you and kind of teach you to use technology a little bit better. So that was a lot of fun. I did that for a few years until kind of I finished my degree and then went on to software engineering.
That's awesome. So I mean, to be fair, that's not necessarily that it was a failure. It was just like it was a moment in time, and it worked there, and then you decided
So
to move on
that's
to
fair.
something else, right? So
Well, do you want to hear a failure, or more of a
yeah.
failure,
Give
more
us
of a
the
flop?
fail.
Okay. So another company I started back in 2014 was called Rocket Department, and there were 5 of us who started this company, and
Ooh,
we had
Oh,
one. Yeah,
five
already.
five
Uh-oh.
partners, equal
Five
it's a
share.
equal
lot of.
equal share partners.
Ooh,
Ooh.
And we had won
ooh.
a hackathon. So this was back in like
Oh
2014.
no.
Hackathons were really
Mm,
popular at the time. Like
Yeah.
yep.
everybody was launching a cool app at a hackathon and making $1 million. I mean, those are just the kind of headlines, but
Uh
they're
huh.
very popular. So I started competing in hackathons with a group of people.
Yeah.
And so one of the prizes was, oh, you can incorporate your company and become a business. And we didn't really have like a
Wait.
plan.
That was the prize. You can start
The
a
prize
business.
was
Like tell
incorporation.
me they at least give you some money for that. It wasn't like here they gave you some
They like
paperwork. Here you
cover
go.
lawyer fees and like all that stuff. So it's like all,
Okay. Okay.
A
the
gift or a
local
curse.
lawyer had donated his time and effort, to do the paperwork.
Spoiler, you don't need a
But
lawyer. Anyway, go ahead.
so and we had built an automated cereal machine for the hackathon. So it was a
Go
cereal
on.
machine that had like 3 kind of areas that you put cereal into. It was app controlled, and you could mix and match the cereal
This is
as it
cereal with a
came
C,
out
not
into the bowl.
cereal port S cereal. Okay, good. All right.
No,
Yeah,
cereal with the C. Like
good.
you eat the cereal. So there was a little bowl, and we had a light sensor. And when you put the bowl down, it would dispense the cereal. And there was a milk jug that had a pump, and the milk would come in.
Pumped
And there was a
milks.
spoon
Sounds so
dispenser that like
gross.
shot the spoon, into thing. It was really a joke, right? Like we weren't trying to build a cereal dispenser business, right?
Yeah.
It was just a fun project. And then we kind of got in this situation where it's like, maybe we should do consulting for businesses who want to build ideas. So we kind of like explored that. Maybe we should
like an
build our
incubator?
own thing. There was
Huh.
not a lot of direction,
Okay.
right? And I did that business for 5 years. 5 years.
Like
Wow.
full time or side hustle thing?
Not full time, side
Okay.
hustle, but I mean,
Was
nights
anybody
and
full time of
weekends.
the 5?
We kind of rotated. Like sometimes somebody would be full time. I mean, over the course of 5 years, there was a few people when we'd have big projects. We got some big projects. We did some work for Uber for a while, so that was like a big name.
Okay.
But
Wow.
consulting was not a gig that I was into. And this was like very traditional. Like they come to you, I want to build this. You draft a proposal, right? It's gonna be this
And
much. Then there's like scope creep, right? Because they're like,
Always
oh, I
scope creep.
assumed this feature would be included, right? In my thing. And we're like, that's not included. That's extra. And a lot of like contract management kind of stuff.
uh-huh.
Which I just personally was not for me. There's a lot of successful freelancers out there who do that kind of work, and that is great for them. But I learned that I hated it. And I definitely spent too long on that business. Like looking back, what is the lesson I learned there? Probably should have closed that down year 2, year 3, And it was kind of that sunk cost, right? Of like I put so
You're
much
like, oh, we're
into
committed.
it, and I really wanted to make it work.
Those award-winning and Andrew, you could probably speak to this too, but it's like that's almost it can be a gift and a curse, right? Where you get you're coming off this high from like winning a contest, right? And so you kind of think you're just like, okay, we're the bee's knees here. We've got something, but it can end up being like lightning in a bottle of sorts, where it's like you don't really know what you're gonna do with it, but everybody's telling you did such a great job, and it's like, so you've had some success, but maybe not enough success or not enough conversation around what's the goal, where are we trying to be, some of the stuff that we need to go back into for today's theme here. So to finish the story, Emma, like what do you feel like you learned from that and then took into your later endeavors?
I think closing businesses sooner was definitely a lesson I learned after that. And I've since then closed a few businesses, but I feel like I closed them at the right time. right? I just reached a point where I was like, okay, well, my rocket department experience, I just looking back, I was in it way too long, right? So that was a
Hmm.
great lesson that like it's okay to close a business. It is not the end of the world. It's like it's very hard because you've been telling all these people that you're trying to build this thing,
Yeah.
and then suddenly you've got to tell them, well, it didn't work,
It's over.
right?
Yeah.
That's
And the
Yeah.
first time was really scary, right? Like,
sure.
Hmm.
Well, it feels like a breakup, right? I mean, you've got
Hmm.
four other people here that you're worried you're going to be
mhm,
disappointing or letting down and all this stuff. It's like I don't know. Like I keep going back and forth. Like having a partner versus going solo is,
Hmm.
there's the strengths and the weaknesses, but the feeling like there are other people relying on you, and if you're not happy and like you can just get sucked into complacency in a bad relationship
mhm,
and nobody's being honest with each other, and it
Yep.
leads
yeah,
to a lot of potential wasted time and energy,
yeah,
when you should have just parted ways sooner, right? So how do
yeah.
Hmm.
you, I mean, obviously you have the benefit of hindsight now, Em, where you like you can look back and make that, but like what is it that you guys should have done to realize? Like what is it that you
Yeah.
realized that made you go in
I
hindsight we should have
think
closed down sooner?
kind of what you mentioned, being more comfortable, being honest about like how I was feeling and what wasn't
Hmm.
working. And I'm one of those people, kind of classic people pleaser, right? Especially when I was
Same,
younger.
same.
I want to make everybody happy. I don't want to let anybody down.
Right.
But
Sure.
it gets you into a bad cycle sometimes. And so from that experience, I definitely learned to like just be honest when there's a problem and you're not feeling good. Much better to bring it up now than
Mm-hmm.
wait two
Sure.
years, right? And you usually find out the other person has maybe similar feelings, or they have things unsaid. I find being the person who's vulnerable first often helps someone else open up, and then you can have that real discussion
Right.
instead of just kind of pretending like everything's going great, and nobody really feels great about it.
Well, trusting your gut and realizing if you feel a certain way, there's a good chance like other people are feeling the same way and not
Hmm.
talking about it too. So it obviously comes down to communication. Ethan in the chat says, "Yeah, it's heart wrenching when you decide to give up your sunk cost." We talk about sunk cost fallacy, like we're really pot
Yep.
committed to something, and then it feel to let go. And especially if you've been there 5 years, like the longer you've been doing it, the
The
more
longer,
you
the
feel.
worse it feels,
But
right?
but I mean, come
Hmm.
on, there's some red flags here. Like were you guys profitable? Like were you guys ever paying yourselves? Like so
No,
there's
I
like these
mean,
indicators you're not
it was
really a
like,
sustainable business,
I
right?
mean, the
Hmm.
problem was boom and bust, right? Like we were doing
Feast
these
and
big
famine.
contracts, we were doing some contracts for 30K, 50K. I mean,
Yeah.
at that time I was like, whoa, that's a lot of money. But then there was the client management aspect. We were all engineers. One, we didn't really have a like project manager type person or like account manager type person.
Uh-huh.
We were more makers, right? And
Yeah,
nobody
Hmm.
really wanted to be an account manager. I
I
think to
know.
be
I don't want
successful,
to do the books. Somebody's got to do it. Shut up.
you
You do
need
it.
the skill set.
Yeah.
Oh man, the books were a mess. That's another lesson
Hmm.
learned there, is like,
Yeah.
oh, tax season was like a nightmare because we didn't track things, right?
Oh
Fixed
no.
What?
all of that and learned to solder kits, like got a lot better, right? Because
Sounds like an
get these
episode of
bills
Big
from the
Brother meets
IRS.
business. Like you're just everybody's kind of wants to do
I
their own thing, and yeah, that's crazy.
I kind of consider that business, a rocket department, my MBA. I never went to get an MBA,
Yeah.
but
Your
those
your
five
street
Hmm.
your
years
street smart MBA. Yeah.
was getting my
Nice.
MBA, and trying not to make those mistakes. And I mean, I did learn a ton. I also had a lot of fun. Like, I don't want to say it was like all bad, right?
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of great times too. But towards the end, it was like, this could have ended sooner,
Well,
you
okay, so
know?
you touch on so many great parts that relate to our thing today. So it's like I think the lesson that I'm hearing from that is like one, there was not a good definition of what you guys were, who you wanted to be. You didn't
Hmm.
have the
Mhm.
goals. Like you weren't honest with yourselves about like, are you even sustainable? It sounds like a lot of everybody else was
Yeah.
supporting themselves via something else. So
Yeah.
a lot of
And are you
times,
happy
are you?
doing this work, right? Because,
That's
like,
huge.
I mean,
Hmm.
maybe we could have made it work. I mean, like I said, people make consulting and freelancing work, and that
Sure.
was kind of the model. But even if we were quote unquote successful money wise, right? I think I still would have been unhappy. I just didn't like that doing that kind of work, right?
Excellent point. So there's financial sustainability and then there's emotional
Yeah.
sustainability, right? And both
Yeah.
are
Yep.
very 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 important. So I'm glad you brought that part up. So I think it's pretty clear when you don't have financial sustainability. If people are like, I'm not making any money, I have to go get a job or whatever. Like it's just
Mhm.
everybody's financial circumstances can be different. But emotional, you know, some people just have more of a propensity for risk tolerance than others and all sorts of
Mhm.
stuff. And it just blows my mind, like trying to reconcile 5 differing opinions on how to like run something at a 20% stake. I mean, is there a precedent of a company that's even founded that way that's been successful with
I don't think
that
there's a
many?
successful one, I'll tell you
Yeah.
that.
So like, should that be a red flag from the jump? Like, you
Yeah,
know,
I do like working with partners still, though. You brought up business
yeah.
partners and Evergreen support. I have a
Okay.
50-50 partner, right? We're
Okay.
split. And I have a partner too with Learn to Solder Kits. He is not online as much as I do and helps more in the background, but we're also 50-50.
So not
And
a
I
silent
really like
partner, but
that.
like kind of a backseater more, or I don't know
Yeah.
how you would define that. Okay. Okay.
And I really like having a partner if you're aligned on goals, right? You got to be
Sure.
aligned on where you're going. And if you're not,
Mm-hmm.
then it's not going to work, right?
And
Mm-hmm.
that's much easier to do if the idea forms with a business in mind from the jump versus like,
Yep.
hey, we were having fun with this thing. Oh, we could start a business from it, which is such the
Yeah.
maker syndrome a lot of the time, right? Like Andrew, how many times have we gone to like
Mm-hmm.
a maker fair or a rep rap festival or something, and you're getting all this great feedback from people like, I would totally buy that. I would totally buy that. And they're like,
Yep.
oh, I should just start a business and I can make, and then I can build robotics that I love and I can sell it and
Mm-hmm.
make a living. And then very quickly the
Yep.
maker realizes what Emma's talking about. Like, I don't want to do the books. I don't want to do all the things that actually require. This sucks the joy out of it because now I have to do this
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again. And I'm only just successful enough, maybe barely, to keep going. And you know, it's
Yeah.
there's
And it's a lot of time,
there's a
right?
lot
A
more
huge amount
of
of
that
time.
grind than I think that you're
Yeah.
even when you hit these milestones, you get the big PO and all that stuff. Then you grow. There was somebody in the chat earlier talking about that. Alex was talking about he had his epiphany. Where was it?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yep. About
yeah,
a rocket, right?
yeah.
Startups are like
Scaling a
rocket
business is like
ships,
a
and
rocket.
the larger, yep, the larger the startup is, the more fuel it takes to get off the ground, the more energy.
Mm.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly
That's a
so
it.
great
there's
point.
there's a sweet spot
Mm-hmm.
then, obviously, where you're getting the maximum, you know, thrust per weight
Mm-hmm.
distribution, and
Mhm.
that is going to be a different calc for every type of business and
Yeah.
person and all that other stuff too. So, but
I
that's a really
think
good point.
something you said about like the bigger the startup, right, the harder it is to get off the ground. So one of the things with Learn to Solder Kits, I was like, I actually wanted to build a much more complicated product. I wanted to do like IoT robot something. I don't know,
Ah,
very
Like
maker,
reflow
oriented.
yeah.
kits and like major pick
And
and place
I was
projects. Wow.
like,
Okay.
I don't even know how to fulfill orders. Like, how do people place orders
Mm.
and ship orders? And there's a whole
Mm-hmm.
logistics
Got to
side
walk
to
before you run,
everything,
Em.
Yep.
manufacturing. And so Learn to Solder Kits was actually designed as a starter business to kind of teach me that stuff so I could go
Starter
on and
business.
build more complicated products. I ended up just building Learn to Solder Kits. I have not gone on to build more complicated products, but the idea was like, oh, they build it themselves. Like, that's a great product to manufacture,
Mm-hmm.
right? We just put parts in the bags, right?
Yeah.
Turns out putting
Yeah.
parts in bags is hard, and shipping thousands of them is also hard.
Kidding. Yes.
Um,
Yep.
you'd
Yeah.
think it wouldn't be that hard. I think you said that, Andrew, is like, oh, it'll be so easy,
Oh,
right?
we love to
Yep.
Well, I
gloss
will tell
Yeah.
over
you,
the
somebody
details.
Mm-hmm.
orders 1,000 of them, and you're like, oh, this does not seem so easy
You
anymore,
really
right?
don't realize like how much 1,000 of something is until you have to sit there and put 1,000 of something into a bag and ship them
Oh,
somewhere. And like, oh my
We
absolutely.
god, that's a
had
ton of stuff.
we had similar issues like when we started Gloop. It's like, oh well, it can't be that hard to bottle a bottle of Gloop and then sell it to someone and then ship it.
Yeah.
And here we are, we're doing like 3,000 to 4,000 bottles a month. you know?
It's
And when you think
huge.
about it, it's like, okay, how do you do thousands of bottles a month? Like, how do you schedule the production lines? How do you make for
Yep.
sure that you're not running out of the reagents in order to run, to actually make those products? Yeah,
Yeah.
it gets
Mhm.
complicated.
And then the more you're shipping them, right, more chance one gets
Hmm.
lost in transit, or maybe they
Yep.
got a bad part, or who knows, right? But
Hmm.
there's 0.01%
Yeah.
failure chance, but as you're shipping thousands, that
Yeah.
starts to come
Yes.
up,
It's
right?
never just like step 1, order products, step 2, put products in bags, step 3, ship, step 4, profit, right? Like that's just,
Yeah.
oh,
Yep.
that's simple. How hard? It's like, wait a minute, I have to deal with returns now. I have to deal with
Yep.
breakage and companies shipping
Yep.
me stuff that wasn't to spec and blah 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 blah.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, Andrew.
so Emma, hit on an excellent point where she had this idea of a more complicated product that she wanted to build, and then she said, "Well, wait, I kind of want to do something smaller."
Yeah.
And that again, that whole
Training
idea
wheels
of
business.
MVP is just get
Mhm.
enough to test and see and evaluate. That is the key to
Yeah.
sustainability. What is the minimum viable thing that I can do at this moment to
Mhm.
get my feet wet to see if this thing can go, and then from there scale it? And it turns out that your learn to solder kits were incredibly successful, and you were able to
Yep.
keep growing that, and
Yep.
keep it just with that without even having to go on to your bigger
Yeah,
product
and
at all.
still learning, right? Like I mentioned, I've been
Yeah.
doing it for 7 years. I'm still solving problems, still figuring out how to streamline
Hmm.
purchase orders. It's not even though it's such a simple kit, there's so much to learn, so much complexity. Bringing on employees, I mean, that was a
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
huge learning experience. I mean, there's a
Oh my
lot there
gosh.
for a, quote unquote simple product, you
Oh,
know.
Sure.
for sure. Well, we talk about data gathering all the time. Emma, we've talked about that. Andrew, we've talked about it. So it's like just getting
Hmm.
that feedback, getting that information, and just like understanding where you even are so that you can set the goals, so that you can understand what sustainable is. And the
Mhm.
advice, I mean, Andrew brought it home so succinctly that by just start with something that may even seem overly simple, because you'll be surprised how not simple that it actually is,
Hmm.
No,
and collect that data and get the experience. It's all about getting
yeah,
experience under your belt, right? And learning,
yeah.
and you're gonna, who
I
knows what
think
ideas you'll get from that.
one interesting experience I've had a lot with maker businesses too. People come, they find me on Twitter and talk to me, and they say, "Oh, I love your kits. I want to ship my own kits or some
Hmm.
variation." I'm like,
Hmm.
"That's awesome." And they usually ask for help. Could you help me sell on Shopify? Help me sell on Amazon, because
Yeah.
those are the things I do.
Yeah.
And I always say,
Hmm.
"Sure, no problem. Build 25 of them,
Yep.
and I will help you make your listing on Amazon." Great, right? And most people can't get to that 25 spot, right? So I think that's a good first goal, right? Can you
Ah.
produce
Mm.
25 units of what you want? Doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't need perfect packaging. Learn to solder kits had
Yeah.
terrible packaging, but like, can you make 25 shippable units? Surprisingly hard problem, right?
Hmm.
That's a great little test. So let me ask you this. When you get asked that, because that happens, certainly the more you build in public and the more that you share your experience, the more you're going to have people DMing, messaging you, emailing you, asking you for some guidance. My question, first of all, is, are you charging for those consulting services, or are you doing this out of the
I do
goodness
it
of
out
your
of the
heart?
goodness of my heart. I mean, I like
Hmm.
to talk to people about businesses. I'm on Twitter a lot, right? So you can always ask me questions there. I mean, sure, if it gets too specific, I'm gonna be like, I can't help you. But
Hmm.
most people are kind of appreciative of the time that I spend, and even once in a while, if I've had a good back and forth, I'll even do a quick coffee chat with people. Where
I
I
mean,
don't
that's how
want to,
we met, I
don't
guess. So
everybody
yeah,
sign
yeah,
up for a
yeah,
coffee chat, but
yeah, yeah.
15-30 minutes, video call, tell me about your business, I'll tell you what I think, and what you should try.
Mm,
Because I had a lot of people help me, along the way. We were talking about mentorship, I think, before we went live,
yeah.
and there were a lot of great people who gave me advice, so I try and
Pay it
pay it
forward.
forward.
I love it. So
Hmm.
let's stay on that for a second, because that dovetails nicely into my little Twitter chat of and talking about support, which I know you have many thoughts
Mhm.
on as well, given that you have a business that run support. But when I asked you, like, are you charging for your consulting services? So I'm with you. I'm also a people pleaser. I also generally want to help people. I feel bad when people are asking me for help with stuff and I have to say no. But that is probably one of the big, I don't know if it's failings, but things to learn for a lot of entrepreneurs. Andrew, maybe you can speak to this, like learning to say no becomes more
Yes.
and more important as you grow, because there is just not enough time to help everyone. It becomes a disservice at some point to all of those that you are obligated to if you allow yourselves the distraction of all the people that need help, right?
We're talking about sustainability, right? And
Sustainability.
it is sometimes more about the things and opportunities you say no to, rather the
Yep.
opportunities and things you say yes to.
Yeah, that's a
You know,
Jobsian quote, I
I'll
believe.
share.
Yeah.
I'll share a really quick one. 2 years in, we were approached by Granger, and they wanted to start carrying Gloop and reselling it
That's a
on,
that's a
their
big name.
industrial site.
Yeah.
It's a big name, and with it came a massive reseller contract, and a lot of terms that we had to hold to. And I would have loved to have gone through and said, yes, let's go, let's get Granger on board, let's start selling Gloop through Granger. But the problem is at the time we couldn't man the production lines. We didn't have a bottling line. We didn't have a labeling machine. We were still labeling by hand. We were still doing a lot of processes by hand. We would have never been able to keep up, and there would have been so many other things that we would have fallen behind on. Now, one could say, well, those are good problems to have. You can solve them, but there's still problems. And it just wasn't right at the moment. And so we said no, because it wasn't going to allow us to grow in a way which was sustainable. So I think, you're exactly right. It comes back to not saying yes to some people.
Well, and sometimes it can be not right now, or it can be like I know that we have a tendency, we don't want to like burn bridges and close doors and stuff like that. So there is an art to it. And I always say, like, this is one of the things I love about Joel Telling so much, is he's like a master of like saying no with a smile and people leaving feeling good about it. Like watching him do that is just amazing to me. Because that is not an easy skill.
I need to study this person to figure out how to do it.
So he's the 3D printing nerd on stuff, and he gets asked questions all the time about, hey, will you be on my show? Will you do this? And like he realizes, like, I don't have time to do all the things that are asked of me. Go to all the events, do all these things, and that gets worse and worse the bigger you get. That's why I am so humbled that when we get big names like Joel Hacksmith, whomever, Ben Eady, all these people that are just like top tier, like gods in their own little spaces, for them to actually give the time, you start to realize like that is your most valuable resource. So the Twitter conversation, if you will, that I was referring to was, we offer a product on our store that is an upgrade kit for the belt printers that we have. So it's a 3D printer that prints on like a little treadmill. And it's got the advantage of like basically being able to do infinitely long pieces or just endless production of, think of the I Love Lucy chocolate line, just prints one and then it falls off and then prints another one. And so you just put a bucket at the end of this thing and it's like, oh, profit, right? And so people see the vision of that and they want to do that. And we've invested so much time and hours into refining it. And I'm still working on it. I'm still not like at 100%. There's still some weaknesses, but we've realized that this is a tool that we want to lean into for manufacturing and all this stuff. And so part of my hustle culture has always been like, how can I, use other people, how can other people help me fund what I want to do, right? So we started selling a lot of the upgrades that we implemented, but the problem is that like it's kind of a black box, and I've intentionally held a lot of like our secret sauce close to the vest, because it's you realize pretty quickly when you get to this, like it is not 3D printing in the sense that a lot of people have, where it's like I can throw any file at this thing and it's going to spit out a good result. Like it requires a good amount of customization for your specific application, the way industrial tools often do. But because it is made by a hobbyist, inexpensive manufacturer, a lot of people look at it just like any other 3D printer, where they think I can take whatever model I want, I can slice it, it will come out on the belt. And
Mhm.
so while we've had great success for our application, it's because I've spent like hundreds and hundreds of hours refining it to print the very specific things that we want to do. And so
Mhm.
I've had to disclaim very heavily, and it's still not enough for a lot of people. This is an advanced kit. You have to put the time into tinkering and stuff. Like, we are a small company. Like, I cannot run support, and I certainly cannot run support for just Creality in general, who is not known for running support on their own. And
Mhm.
yet we
Mhm.
still have a lot of unhappy customers that will buy our kit with the expectation they can just slap it on there and it's going to just print money for them.
Mhm.
And so, Emma, that's a long story, a long way of like, as a support company, setting expectations from the jump is so
Mhm.
critical in terms of defining like
Yep.
who the target market is. And like, sometimes like I'm not trying to be a kit seller or a reseller. This is not our core competency. Like, this is
Mhm.
important to me because I want to see more people get hands on with this tech,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and invest in it. But if it becomes too cumbersome to maintain, I'm just going to stop doing it. It's not
Mhm.
it's not like what I want to grow the business on. So, question
Mhm.
is, how do you define for in support cases? Like, a lot of times, how do you get down to like, is this person even the right customer for this product, and how do you handle all the nuance of that? And
I mean, it's hard, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
a
yeah.
hard problem, right? Which I think is why a lot of people hire Evergreen to help, right?
Good. So tell us about
I
this. Go.
think I
Yeah.
think one of the most important things I found is people want to feel heard, right? That is the most
Yeah.
important thing for the customer. They want to know they sent their email and somebody read it and is going to respond to them. Even if they get an answer that they maybe quote unquote don't like, right? Of sorry, that's too much support. I can't, do that for you, or you need to pay extra for, a technical support call.
Yeah.
If you respond quickly, people seem to take that better. If you're like, oh, I don't really want to respond, now it's like 7 days later. They've already sent
Yeah.
Mhm.
like two follow-up emails, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to
Mhm.
say no, right?
Go
We talked
away.
about people
Yeah.
pleasing.
Yeah.
I don't want to say no. The person gets frustrated, right? Because
Sure.
there's unknown expectations there, right? So one of the things we try to do with Evergreen is make sure that people feel listened to, even if we don't have the answer, or maybe it's an answer they don't want to hear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting back to them
Mm-hmm.
quick and politely and saying, hey, we're looking into this. We're so sorry your shipment hasn't arrived. Please give us a few days, right? Set a little expectation, and then following
Mm.
up, meeting that expectation is key, right, to building trust with your customer. So those are
Yeah.
some things we try to do. Quick responses.
That no, honestly, I've found the same thing. That goes a long way. Just when, like, a lot of times there are people just like, they're so frustrated, they just had an experience and they don't
Mhm.
expect anything. They're just angry and they want something to yell at. And so they
Yeah.
Yep.
log onto your chat or your email and they just like lace into you. And I can't tell you how many times I've replied, "I'm so sorry you're having this problem." And they go, "Oh my God, there's a human on the other end of this thing. Like,
Oh,
what,
absolutely.
what is happening here?"
Absolutely. Oh,
And
you're
then
a person?
the
I'm
tone
so
changes
sorry.
immediately. Like, I'm sorry, I thought it was
Yeah.
just yelling into the ether. Yeah, no. Like, I watched this email and we respond to our support tickets. So
Yeah.
that's it's so sad to me how low the bar for support even is in a lot of people's minds
Yeah.
in this day and age.
But I think it's hard too, because I've been on the other side, the business owner side, right? With Learn to Solder Kits, is you've got so much going on. Okay, we're packing,
Mhm.
we're shipping kits. Okay, I gotta do my marketing thing. Oh, I have a call with the CPA about taxes. I mean, who knows? The to-do list is 25 items long, and you're like, oh, I'll get to that email tonight,
Right.
for sure.
Yep.
And then
And then
before you
Mhm.
it
know it,
just
it
it kind of
slips.
rolls to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
next
yeah, I
day, and you're
know.
like, oh, I gotta write a nice response and
I'm not in
say
the right
no, and then it
mood right
rolls
now.
to the next day.
Yeah, I know
Um,
that feeling.
I mean, it's a real challenge. It's a challenge I have definitely faced, right?
Yeah.
And Evergreen support is kind of the solution. I will say it's a lot easier when your only job is responding to the emails, right? Like for these businesses we support,
Yeah.
that is my goal. Respond to the emails, right?
That
Get the answers the
Mhm.
yeah.
customer needs. Make sure they feel heard, right? Because
Do they give you
that is key.
maybe it's different for every customer, but do they give you any degree of decision making authority or dollar figure you can
Yeah.
make concessions on, or how does that, how do you put guardrails on that?
Oh yeah, great question. It definitely depends on the customer, the client that we're working with, but most of our clients we manage some sort of billing, return, refund process for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they give us some rules around that. It may be you can refund up to 1 month if it's a subscription based company.
Okay.
Mm.
We have a refund policy that's 30 days. So no questions asked, 30 days, you get the refund, right? And so we define those policies.
Yeah.
Now there are situations where somebody says, I want 6 months refund, on my subscription, and we are not authorized to do that. And
Yeah.
so then that gets escalated up to the business owner and say, how would you like us to handle this?
Uh-huh.
They either handle it personally or they may give us a few notes and say, oh yeah, I this is a one-off, please refund them, or no,
Sure.
please explain to them our refund policy.
Huh. That's
Hmm.
honestly, that's got to be a different experience when you're actually like that disconnected. We've talked on the past, and Andrew, like we take it kind of
Mhm.
personally a lot of the time when we have to deal with support on our own, because like we're so close to the
Yep.
product, and we feel like it reflects on our poor design skills if we screwed up on something and all that stuff. And so when you have like that
Yep.
buffer in between, where I don't know, like you said, if you can just set some guidelines and some guardrails on that whole thing and let somebody else do that, like that, I think that can free you up emotionally and mentally in another way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's an interesting value to potentially sell your services on.
Yeah.
I like
I
that.
think we also help a lot with like that overwhelmed feeling. I know I had this running my business. You log into the inbox, you're like, oh my God, 50 unread messages. Like,
Yep.
where do I start? Because you don't have context, you don't know which is important, which isn't important, what's just a thank you. It's just a lot to take on.
Yeah.
Ellis and I, we work on keeping the inbox clean, right? So less messages in there. And then even if there is a message, we use like an internal note system on the ticket where we will hopefully give you the context you need. If we can't respond, we can at least do some things and say, hey, I was able to locate this customer's order. Here's the link to the order. I see that, the order was delayed and we didn't ship it out for this reason, and can give you all the information so you as the business owner can just make a decision and move on
Okay.
instead of having to go hunt down your Shopify system and, oh, let me check the
Mm-hmm.
tracking number and let me see if they've ordered from us
Mhm.
before, and like, there's a lot to pull together.
Sure. Well, we are running a bit long, as we always do, because we love going into all this stuff. So apologize for that, Emma. But let's try to wrap this up in a nice little bow for our listeners here. So we've covered a lot of ground, as we often do, talking about goal setting, sustainability, kind of some personal anecdotes in the realm and whatnot. And obviously we love to disclaim, like, we don't have all the solutions. We are still all very much in the process. What works for
Yep.
us
Absolutely.
may not work for you. Your mileage may vary, all that good stuff. But what do you guys feel like we've learned, and what do we want to apply in terms of like being sustainable, setting some better goals for 2023? How about Andrew? Why don't you start, since you've been rather quiet here today?
Sure. So I think I would say the biggest thing is ask yourself, what is it that you want out of your business? What is the end goal of the business? And then start working backwards from there. What could be reasonably expected to, the things that you need to do to get to that end goal, and then break it up into smaller milestones,
Mm-hmm.
and then, understand that even though this is a long-term goal, you're going to miss some of those milestones. That's okay. Learn to level set, learn to readjust. And sometimes if you have to stop doing something, it's not that you failed. Maybe you can come back to it. It's just now you need to go in a slightly different direction. So I think it all starts with having that conversation of what is the end goal that you want,
Mm-hmm.
and then working backwards.
That's a great point. Emma, what would you say? How do you wrap this all up in your mind, or what do you
Yeah,
want to
I
do
mean,
going forward?
I love what you said, Andrew, about what do you want to get out of your business, right? I think this kind of comes
Mhm.
back to like people comparing to others. It's okay to not want to run a $10 million
Yeah.
Mhm.
maker empire, right? Or whatever it is. That's totally fine if you kind of say, I don't want a huge team of people, right? Or some of the founders I work with want no employees.
Yeah.
Like it's too much responsibility. It's not what they want to do. So they
Yeah.
work with contractors or other people.
Yeah.
And I think taking some time to reflect for yourself and your skill sets and what makes you happy is going to allow you to set the best goals, right? Don't just
Mhm.
set a 10,000 MRR or 1 million revenue goal because you saw somebody else do it and the
Mm-hmm.
number sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Think about if that
Mhm.
will make you happy in the long run.
Yeah, you know, we say it all the time, but taking the time to step back, do some reflection, write down exactly what you're talking about. What is it that you want? What makes you happy? What is
Mhm.
and you're not always going to get it right. It's a moving target a lot of the time, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
You know, it is a challenge, and but you know, you also have to celebrate. This is why we talk about doing the wins and stuff too. You need to make sure you celebrate the wins and the successes, because
Mm-hmm.
that is such a neglected part of the storytelling in a lot of people's own mind, right? When you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking
Mhm.
about like, oh, it's actually not as bad as I thought. You know, we're
Yeah.
way more quick to reflect on the bad things that happen to us than the good a lot of the time.
Yeah. Definitely.
And so forcing yourself on the exercise of just, you know, realizing like, hey, actually, like this was good. This happened well. Like
Yeah.
this isn't so bad.
Yeah.
It
On
really
the
helps.
on the note of comparison too, instead of comparing to others, one thing I like to do is compare myself to my old self, right? Like what
Mm,
Mhm.
would
past Emma.
2018 Emma think
Yeah.
of where I am in 2023, right?
What
Like
would she
if
think?
I could tell her.
Yeah.
Oh, she would think it was awesome. I mean, the fact that I'm working full time on my businesses. So I went full time on my businesses just about a year ago, right?
Yeah.
And that had been a long term goal for me and one that I had a lot of doubts about. I really struggled with what's the right business size. And man, if I
Yeah.
went back in time and told 2018 Emma, like, yeah, we're doing it and it's working, right? I would have been like,
Mhm.
whoa,
That's a great tip.
And so that's a really good way to kind of reframe instead of saying, oh, I saw this person on Twitter and their revenue number is bigger than mine and they only started 2 years ago and I started 7 years
Yep.
ago. That is not the
Mhm.
context you need. Think about yourself and where you were a year ago,
Absolutely.
5 years ago.
That's a fantastic,
Mhm.
and listen, that is a fantastic note to end on, in my opinion. Thank you for sharing everything that you've done today. We'll have to have you back at some
Thanks
point
for
because there's
having
just
me.
so
This was a lot
much
of
to talk
fun.
about. But
Mhm.
thank you for everybody in the chat that joined us today. I hope you guys learned something, enjoyed it. Thank you for feeding us questions and comments as always. And we look forward to catching you on the next episode of Maker That Money. Until then, I am Pooch.
I'm Andrew of 3D Gloop.
And I'm Emma
and
of
we
Learn to Solder Kits.
and we are signing off. Everybody have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
See ya.